Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is Métis filmmaker and advocate Joseph Fourre. In 2023, Fourre's son Harlan died of an accidental drug poisoning. Since the death of his son, Fourre has been raising awareness about the harms of drugs with a campaign called No Thanks, I'm Good. Fourre himself admits to having his own dark past as a former drug dealer. Joseph, thanks so much for being with us to talk about which I'm sure is a difficult subject for you.
Well, thank you for having us and giving us the time to spread this important message.
For those unfamiliar with what happened to your son Harlan, can you tell us a bit about him and what did happen?
Harlan was an extraordinary young man. He was looking forward to paying off his car. He was, investing in the stocks. He was just a robust, happy 31-year-old man, looking towards his future in life. He was a master roofer, worked with one company for 10 years, and survived addiction through my addiction as a parent. And so he knew what he wanted in life. And one unfortunate evening when he went up north to do some work, he went out one night and decided to try something that somebody in that crew bought, and unfortunately it wasn't what they said it was, and it was almost pure fentanyl. And he collapsed, and the establishment was found, and by the time they were able to establish a heartbeat, he had suffered a catastrophic brain injury as a result, and we took him off life support, and it was a tough one, because he wasn't a drug addict. He didn't fit the whole sense of what was being described in our opioid crisis, of the people that were dying. And it was a real shock to our family and to our community.
Like you say, you mentioned there, it was a shock because Harlan wasn't known to use to hard drugs, correct? Yeah,
no. He, as a matter of fact, when I told his boss, what had happened to him, his boss was the one who told me, I don't believe it, Harlan didn't do drugs. As a matter of fact, Joe, he said, when we finished a roof or a job, we would always have a couple beers, and somebody would pull out something, and Harlan would always say, no thanks, I'm good, I'll stick to my beer. And that became the basis of the campaign that we initiated as a result of the incident. When you go through something like this as a parent, the first thing that comes up is anger, and I didn't know what to do with that anger. And being in recovery myself, I knew that if I didn't look after this anger in a positive way, that the chances of me losing everything that I had built over the last 5 years was great. So I talked to my wife and I said, I'd like to do this. Nobody was talking about this. Nobody was talking about the recreational drug user. Everything that we talked about, and as far as the opioid crisis and the number of deaths, all were kind of catered to the addiction, to the addiction aspect of it. And after talking with the coroner's office over the numbers of 2022, I said, help me understand. Help me understand these numbers. So he gave me a breakdown, and what we found out was quite alarming. That of the 426 deaths that we had in 2022, 226 of those were fentanyl related, were the primary or contributing, and 220, the fentanyl was found mixed with other drugs. Mm-hmm. So that was telling me that it wasn't just the opioid users that were dying, that we had youth, young people that were doing marijuana, cocaine, meth, were all getting tainted drugs, tainted with fentanyl or otherwise, and dying. So we decided that, somebody needs to tell them. There's that picture of me and Harlan, head forehead to forehead when he was brought home, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was his only parent because two years prior, his mother died, and his mother, was coming out of addiction, had some sobriety, and on her birthday decided that she would give herself a treat. And she was a crack cocaine user, and she bought one rock of crack and did one hoot, and she died because the crack was laced with fentanyl. So I'm sitting in this hotel, in the hospital room, and I don't know what to do, and I can hear him clear as day in my head just say, I'm gone, Dad. I'm gone. And I didn't know what to do. And I said, like, what do you want me to do? And he just said, tell others. I could hear him say, just tell others about this. And so we made the difficult decision to take him off life support and start this campaign in the honor of him, that his death would account for something.
Unimaginable decisions you had to make there, for sure. You kind of touched on it, that you've struggled with your own addictions in the past.
Yeah, as a youth, I had suffered some trauma, and I had, taken to alcohol and drugs, and I suffered with addiction for approximately 40 years. And I was addicted to heroin the last few years of it, and I got a call from my daughter who said, Dad, please, that's enough. I'm getting married. I want you to walk me down the aisle. Will you please come home? I was in Edmonton. I'll send you a train ticket. So I made the hard decision, say, okay, I think I can do this. I can do this. And I got on that train. And then I got off the train, and I looked at my kids. Harlan was there, and her, and Nicole. I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done. And I said, but it's going to be a rough ride. I can either go to Detox or, she said, no, we'll do this as a family. I was very fortunate that I had that kind of support. And so we got through the withdrawals, and then made the commitment to regain my life, and one of the things that I regretted the most that my addiction had ever taken away from me was my career in the media. My career telling stories, and my career as a promising filmmaker. So over the last 5 years, that's what I've been working at, is regaining that. We did have some promising scripts to film last summer, but Harlan's death really took the wind out of my sails, and I had to deal with the grief and find this important message that we're going to share.
You mentioned the anger that came afterwards, and not everyone who's lost somebody to addiction is going to put themselves out there, be willing to speak and go out and talk about this. Why did you feel the urge to use your voice?
It was a hard decision. When we first started it, I knew like anger, is not a destructive emotion. You get angry about something, you want to change something. You should be changing what you're angry about. And I was angry at the way that fentanyl was just running wild, in the streets, killing our youth, and nobody was talking about it. So we started talking about it. And I remember our first trip we took up north. We were in Cross Lake, and I started questioning myself, like, why am I doing this? And I'm ripping off the Band-Aid every time I go up and talk about Harlan, talk about what happened. And there was this young 14-year-old boy who came and gave me the biggest hug. And he looked at me and he said, thank you for trying to save our lives and giving us this information, because we didn't know. And that's when I realized, that the message outweighed the pain. And that to continue doing what we're doing in the hopes that if we can just save one, change one life, then it's all been worth it.
Joseph, we're going to talk about the campaign and a lot more here. We just need to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue our conversation here on Face to Face with filmmaker and advocate Joseph Fourre. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Métis filmmaker and advocate Joseph Fourre, who over the last year has been raising awareness about the harms of drugs and what happened to his son Harlan. Joseph, maybe if you could tell us about the No Thanks, I'm Good campaign.
Yeah, well, when we first started, we didn't know really where to kick it off or where to start, and so we decided we'd go back to the PAW, you know, where the incident happened, and we had a march, and it was just before the Labor Day long weekend. We thought that would be a significant date because people were going to go out, they were going to party, they were, you know, that's not long weekend. Mm-hmm. So we organized a march that weekend from the PAW. OCN was supportive, and the mayor was very supportive, and so that's where it really got started. Then afterwards, we met with MKO and Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and told them about the campaign and what we were trying to achieve and what we were trying to do, and they got on board, and we were able to have a big march in June of last year, which was attended by over a couple hundred people who really wanted to go out and support, and so it was telling us that there was this need that needed to be done. Since then, we've worked with some branding people who have come up with things like this. This is what we take out to the communities. We give them a button, and it's got Harlan's story on the back. And it's just a way to introduce the idea that just because you're not an addict or anything like that doesn't mean you can't be affected. Don't be fooled that it can't happen to you. We've got lanyards and fridge magnets that we've developed, and we take posters out to the communities that they can put up in their community centers. All in a way, we just want to get people talking about it. It's such a tough discussion to have, and this is one of the things that we talk about when we're in the communities, especially the parents. Don't be afraid to have those conversations. Talk about the drugs that are out there. Talk to your youth, and support them when they decide, when they choose no thanks, I'm good when it comes to drug use. We need to support them, and we're telling leadership, we need to support our youth. That's the generation that's going to change this, because I look at it from a pure economic standpoint, because after meeting with the chiefs, I heard their frustration. I heard what they were looking for, what they could do, to try and get this problem out of their communities. And from a pure economic standpoint, and the way economics works is the supply and demand. I can't do nothing about the supply. I mean, let's face it, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. Mm-hmm. But I thought, let's see if we can do something about the demand, and go after the demand, and get the young people to start choosing to say, no thanks, I'm good when it comes to drug use. No thanks, is polite, very, very kind, no thanks, And then the second part, I'm good, that's empowering, that it's good to say that I'm good, no kids, no thanks, I'm good without that. And I think, especially, as Indigenous people and our youth, we don't say that to ourselves enough, that I'm good. And even in my own recovery, it took me a long time to be able to say those words for myself, I'm good. So we took that message, and that's the message that we take to the kids is you're going to be the ones. I mean, we can look to the police, we can look to leadership, but I think this problem is not going to be solved. And I said it, when we had the rally, that we have to change it, and we have to change it at the grassroots. So we have to have that next generation that's coming up to be aware, of the dangers of trying something or recreational. We have so many one and dones, so many people thinking that, marijuana is safe, if people smoke marijuana, I tell them, we'll buy it from a dispensary. We had an incident in Thompson where a young 14-year-old boy smoked a joint, went to bed, never woke up. He died, his marijuana was laced with fentanyl. Right. So that's the vastness of what we're trying to deal with here, and nobody was talking about it, And that's what we hope to do, is just to start that conversation.
Well, and you and I were talking about this as well. Like when I was younger, there was the Just Say No campaign and the classic commercial of This Is Your Brain on Drugs. Those were also American commercials that we were just seeing on TVs here ourselves. But, you know, why do you think there hasn't been some kind of a national campaign to raise awareness to the harms that are out there?
Well, I think the opioid crisis, for one, really took a big chunk of national attention, you know, and then of course when we talked about the opioid crisis, it automatically went to addiction. And with the legalization of marijuana, then there wasn't any real need for it. What we're seeing now is the high level of tainted drugs out there, you know, whether it's the marijuana, the cocaine, the meth, you know, some of the recreation, Molly, ecstasy that people have generally thought of as recreational drugs are now being tainted, and people are dying from that. So now I think there's a real need now to have this national campaign, and you know, let's use "No Thanks, I'm Good" as that slogan to get out there. That's what we're hoping for, is that, you know, through this, that Harlan, you know, can send that message out. I mean, I love it. His name was Singing Red Bear, you know, so to help further us and do this, we created the Singing Red Bear Foundation. You know, now we have a board of directors. We're incorporated as a nonprofit organization to try and raise funds so that we can get this. This is not just an Indigenous problem, you know, but it's being led by the Indigenous community because they see it. And they're not afraid to tackle it, and I appreciate the support that we've gotten from our organizations. But this is a societal problem. And until society decides to say, you know what, we need this, then maybe things will change. You know, we can't expect the government to change it. It has to change from the grassroots.
Right. Joseph, again, much more to talk about here, but we do have to just step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is filmmaker and advocate Joseph Fourre. And Joseph, we've been talking about you know, not knowing what is in anything out there anymore. There's a lot of talk these days about a safe supply, particularly over on the West Coast, and here with the new government in place, talking about safe injection sites. Just wondering your thoughts on those types of initiatives.
Well, we definitely need something in the form of harm reduction. If people are going to choose to do drugs, then we should find a way to make it safe for them. And I know a lot of people aren't going to go to safe injection sites. We were looking at test strips, you know, having, you know, places to test your drugs if you're going to do drugs. I struggle with safe injection sites because my own personal experience, it was how I got addicted to heroin, was through a safe injection site in Edmonton. What happens when you build brick and mortar, it creates a hub for that particular community, that neighborhood. And then your drug dealers will move into that neighborhood because they know where the customers are going to use that. So I was addicted to meth for a number of years, and we were looking for meth in Edmonton. We went to a safe injection site, and the person said, you know, well, I have heroin. I've never done that before. He said, don't worry, just go in there. If anything goes wrong, they'll look after you. Problem was, it wasn't open 24 hours a day. So by then I was, you know, the drug had taken a hold of my body, and yeah, I started ODing, overdosing, and lucky enough that, you know, people had Narcan, you know, so, and that's when we talk about the kids. We take Narcan out to the communities, and we tell the kids, like, if you have Narcan in your backpack, that doesn't mean you're doing drugs. That means you're prepared to save a life. Mm-hmm. Because you never know where you're going to run into that situation, whether it be at school, whether it be out with your friends, and maybe even at home. You know, we know that, you know, a lot of children are growing up in situations where there's addiction at home. So learning how to save a life through Narcan, learning how to have test strips available. You know, those are some strong areas which I would love to see happen. And removing the stigma, you know, of drug use, and so that it becomes something that we can talk about without shame. You know, my son was a great man. You know, he made a bad choice one night, and it cost him his life. So, but a lot of people won't talk about it because it brings shame. The first thing when you hear about overdose is shame. When we first brought it up, you know, a lot of people said, well, I didn't know your son suffered an addiction. I'm sorry for it. Well, he wasn't an addict. He made a bad choice. So my son didn't die from an overdose. My son died from fentanyl poisoning. And that's some of the dialogue that we need to change, you know, is how we talk about this, you know, because it's when we use overdose, we took too much. You know, we knew what we were taking, we took too much. But fentanyl poisoning, when you're expecting something and not getting it, you know, and that drug is tainted, you don't know how to prepare yourself for that.
Joseph, where do you know, we have all these levels of government saying, oh, this is emergency, this is a crisis. Are we seeing enough investment in beds and detox beds? Your thoughts on those? I mean, some of these beds you need to have tens of thousands of dollars to even go to in the first place. Yeah,
I mean, I've worked as a program support worker for a number of years. It was part of helping me stay grounded in my own recovery. And I think the key point, you know, the starting point is more beds. You know, we need more publicly funded beds. Mm-hmm. The window when an addict says, I want to stop, is very small. And when he says that, we need to be able to take him right away and put him in there. You know, I talked about one avenue was mandatory drug treatment, you know, and people kind of scoff, like, you know, like, wow, you can't do that. But, you know, when an addict is in full-blown addiction, his capacity to make decisions for himself is impaired, and he becomes a harm to himself. And we do that for other people that have suffered mental illness. When they become incapacitated by their illness, we put them in a place where they can be safe and they can get help. And why we can't do that for the addict that's suffering is an avenue, something that maybe we can look at. But first and foremost, yeah, it's beds, detox. We need to get people off. The drugs have changed so much in the last 20 years. It's not just alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine anymore. It's meth, who just changes the whole composition of your mind. Now we've got the opioids that are coming. We've got some of these designer drugs that are just instantly addictive. You know, so we really need to look at now investing in non-for-profit treatment centers.
Joseph, so much more to talk about. We didn't even get to talk about your own career as a filmmaker and stuff as well, but we are so out of time here. But I do encourage people to go and check out the Facebook page, the No Thanks, I'm Good Facebook page as well, to find out what's going on with the campaign. And Joseph, just a thanks to you for the work that you're out there doing and for being here this week.
Thank you for having us. I really appreciate it. I know Harlan does too.
Awesome. And that is all the time we have for this week's show. You can catch up on any episodes you may have missed by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us this week on Face to Face. We'll see you back here in 7 days.